Imagine a place that vanishes twice a day, a tiny speck of sand in a vast ocean, yet capable of igniting international fury. This is Sandy Cay. More than just a shifting sandbar in the heart of the South China Sea, it's a geopolitical grenade with a multi-billion-dollar fuse. Located a mere whisper away from an island occupied by the Philippines, it sits squarely within China's expansive historical claims. And Vietnam, too, stakes its claim. Why does this landmass, smaller than most city parks, and often swallowed by the tide, matter so much? Because in the fiercely contested Spratly Islands, even the smallest grain of sand can tip the scales of power, redraw maritime maps, and unlock access to a treasure trove of resources and strategic waterways. Welcome to the battle for Sandy Cay, where inches turn into empires and history is written in the shifting sands. Let us dive into the waters of Sandy Cay. The Philippines grounds its claim to Sandy Cay on a multifaceted basis that incorporates legal declarations, geographical proximity, traditional usage, and effective occupation. At the heart of this claim is the assertion that Sandy Cay lies well within the area designated as the Kalayaan Island Group, KIG, a cluster of features within the Spratly Islands that the Philippines officially incorporated into its national territory through Presidential Decree No. 1596, issued in 1978. This domestic legal instrument declares sovereignty over specified maritime features in the South China Sea, and Sandy Cay falls within the coordinates outlined in the decree. While unilateral declarations, such as this, are not universally recognized under international law, particularly when contested by other states, they form a central pillar of the Philippines' long-standing policy position. One of the most compelling elements of the Philippine claim is the geographical proximity of Sandy Cay to Thitu Island, Pag-asa Island, which is the largest Philippine-occupied feature in the Spratly Islands. Sandy Cay lies only about 1.7 nautical miles, approximately 3.1 kilometers, west of Thitu's western shoreline. In contrast, Subi Reef, a nearby feature currently occupied and heavily developed by China, lies about 9.3 nautical miles, roughly 17.2 kilometers, northeast of Sandy Cay. This stark difference in distance is often cited in Manila's diplomatic communications, emphasizing the natural contiguity between Sandy Cay and Thitu Island. In this context, the Philippines argues that Sandy Cay is not a standalone feature, but a geographic extension of territory already under effective Philippine control. Although Sandy Cay itself is uninhabitable due to its tidal nature and lack of vegetation, the Philippines also draws on historical usage narratives to substantiate its claim. Filipino fishermen have long navigated and fished in the waters surrounding Thitu Island and adjacent sandbars, including Sandy Cay. These patterns of traditional usage are supported by anecdotal evidence and local testimonies. While such activities may not fulfill the stringent criteria of effectivities, a legal concept in international law referring to acts of sovereign authority, they contribute to Manila's case under the lens of historical connection and peaceful usage. This is particularly relevant in the broader context of post-colonial maritime claims, where states like the Philippines began asserting sovereignty over offshore features in the wake of independence and amidst growing geopolitical interest in the South China Sea. Philippine officials consistently assert this position in both domestic and international fora. In a statement presented to the Permanent Court of Arbitration, PCA, in 2015, the Philippine government declared that the Kalayaan Island Group, including the low tide elevations and submerged features within its territorial sea and exclusive economic zone, are integral parts of Philippine national territory, over which the Philippines has long exercised sovereignty and jurisdiction. Although the ruling in that case focused primarily on maritime entitlements and not sovereignty per se, it affirmed that low-tide elevations like Sandy Cay cannot be appropriated as sovereign territory by themselves, but could still have significance when located within the maritime zones of other lawful features such as Thitu Island. Strategically, Manila's occupation of Thitu Island, complete with a small civilian population, military outpost, and airstrip, serves as a concrete expression of effective control. This presence has been maintained continuously since the 1970s, reinforcing claims over adjacent features like Sandy Cay. From the Philippine perspective, the logic is clear. Control over Thitu Island inherently extends to proximate features necessary for its defense and maritime access. Moreover, under UNCLOS, Thitu qualifies as an island capable of generating a territorial sea and, possibly, an exclusive economic zone, EEZ, depending on its ability to sustain human habitation or economic life. Sandy Cay, lying within these maritime zones, is thus seen by Manila as falling under Philippine jurisdiction by extension. However, this narrative does not exist in a vacuum. China and Vietnam contest the Philippine claim by invoking their own historical presence and prior discovery theories, some of which predate the 2850 Philippines' formal incorporation of the KIG. Nonetheless, from the Philippine standpoint, the claim to Sandy Cay is rooted in a coherent blend of domestic legislation, geographic logic, long-standing maritime traditions, and the strategic imperative of defending its national interests in the South China Sea. It represents not just a legal stance, but a geopolitical posture aimed at preserving the country's maritime sovereignty in an increasingly contested region. China's claim to Sandy Cay, like much of its assertion over the South China Sea, rests on a combination of historical entitlements, cartographic legacy, and evolving strategic calculus. Central to this claim is the 9-dash line, or more recently the 10-dash line on maps that include Taiwan, a U-shaped demarcation line that envelops nearly 90% of the South China Sea. First introduced on a map published by the Republic of China in 1947 as an 11-dash line, this representation was later adopted and revised by the People's Republic of China. While the exact legal definition of this line remains strategically ambiguous, Beijing continues to assert that the waters, islands, and maritime features enclosed within the dashes fall under its historical jurisdiction. According to the Chinese narrative, this demarcation reflects not only China's sovereign claims over the islands and reefs within the line, but also its historic rights over fishing, navigation, and resource utilization. Chinese scholars and government publications frequently cite ancient maps, navigation records, and imperial decrees from dynasties such as the Han, 206 BCE to 220 CE, to assert that Chinese presence and maritime activity in the South China Sea predates all modern regional states. These claims are further supported by accounts of early Chinese fishermen, traders, and state-sponsored expeditions who are said to have discovered, named, and utilized features such as those found in the Spratly Archipelago, where Sandy Cay is located. The discovery and naming argument is a cornerstone of China's historical rationale. Chinese sources claim that centuries-old names assigned to various reefs and islands in the South China Sea, including Chinese-language toponyms for features near Sandy Cay, serve as evidence of early awareness and implicit sovereignty. This naming, according to Beijing, forms part of the state's symbolic and administrative link to the area, reinforcing what it frames as a continuous exercise of authority. The international legal community, however, finds the Chinese position problematic due to its lack of clarity under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS. While UNCLOS recognizes territorial seas, exclusive economic zones, EEZs, and continental shelves, it does not accommodate sweeping historical rights that contradict the maritime entitlements of other coastal states. This contradiction came to a head in 2016 when the Permanent Court of Arbitration, PCA, in The Hague, ruled in favor of the Philippines, concluding that China's historic rights claims, embodied by the 9-dash line, were incompatible with UNCLOS. China rejected the ruling outright, asserting in a formal white paper that China has indisputable sovereignty over the Nanhai Jiudao, the South China Sea Islands, including the Spratly Islands, and the adjacent waters, and enjoys sovereign rights and jurisdiction in the relevant waters. China's sovereignty and relevant rights and interests in the South China Sea are formed in the long course of history and are consistent with international law. This statement underscores China's position that its rights are not only historical, but reinforced by continuous state practice, despite international legal contestation. Geographically, The 9-dash line encompasses an estimated 3 million square kilometers, overlapping the exclusive economic zones and continental shelves of the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, and Indonesia. Sandy Cay, while geographically closer to the Philippine-occupied Thitu Island, falls within the perimeter of China's asserted maritime domain. Moreover, China's militarization and land reclamation activities in the nearby Subi Reef, only 9.3 nautical miles from Sandy Cay, strengthen its operational footprint and underscore its strategy of area denial and control. Subi Reef has been transformed into a major artificial island equipped with airstrips, radar systems, and naval outposts, allowing China to project power and conduct surveillance over adjacent features, including Sandy Cay. In the context of strategic maritime doctrine, Sandy Cay, though small and often submerged at high tide, is considered part of China's blue national soil. This term is increasingly used in Chinese academic and policy circles to frame maritime features as integral components of national territory, deserving the same protection as land borders. Under this lens, the defense of Sandy Cay is not merely about hydrocarbon prospects or fisheries. It is about territorial integrity, regime legitimacy, and great power identity. The feature, therefore, takes on outsized importance in China's geostrategic imagination, serving as a node in its broader effort to control vital sea lanes, expand its security perimeter, and assert regional leadership. China's claim to Sandy Cay must also be seen through the prism of lawfare and gray zone operations tactics that blur the line between peacetime diplomacy and wartime maneuvering. While Beijing has not physically occupied Sandy Cay, it leverages Coast Guard patrols, maritime militias, and artificial island bases to exert de facto control over its surroundings. This indirect method of expansion allows China to avoid outright conflict, while gradually shifting the status quo, a pattern observed throughout the Spratly Islands. In sum, China's claim to Sandy Cay is a synthesis of historical narrative, strategic necessity, and legal ambiguity. Despite opposition from ASEAN neighbors and international legal bodies, Beijing remains resolute in pursuing its maritime ambitions. Through a combination of diplomatic assertion, militarized infrastructure, and reinterpretation of international law, China is embedding its presence in the South China Sea, feature by feature, reef by reef, including the contentious and symbolically charged Sandy Cay. Vietnam's assertion of sovereignty over Sandy Cay is an extension of its broader, long-standing claim to the entire Spratly Islands archipelago, Truong Sa. This claim rests on a multifaceted foundation comprising historical occupation, continuous administrative control, colonial-era legal inheritance, and adherence to contemporary principles of international maritime law, particularly the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS. Although Sandy Cay lies in close proximity to the Philippine-occupied Thitu Island, Vietnam contends that proximity alone does not constitute legal ownership, a position consistent with prevailing international legal norms. At the core of Vietnam's claim is a meticulously documented historical narrative. Vietnamese authorities cite evidence of state-sponsored expeditions, exploration, and administrative control dating back to the Nguyen dynasty in the 17th and 18th centuries. Naval flotillas, such as the Hoang Sa and Truong Sa units, were dispatched to survey, patrol, and manage the Paracel and Spratly Islands. These expeditions engaged in activities recognized under international law as indicators of effective occupation, including the establishment of markers, collection of marine resources, and rescue of shipwrecked sailors. Notably, these efforts took place during a period when the islands were considered terra nullius, land belonging to no one, thereby strengthening Vietnam's claim of original acquisition under international customary law. This historical continuity was not disrupted by colonial intervention. During the French colonial period, the administration of French Indochina, on behalf of which Vietnam was a constituent, undertook cartographic surveys, installed weather stations, and deployed naval detachments to the Spratlys, These actions reflected a continued assertion of sovereignty, later inherited by the post-colonial Vietnamese state under the doctrine of state succession. Upon gaining independence, both the Republic of Vietnam, South Vietnam, and subsequently the Socialist Republic of Vietnam continued to assert jurisdiction over the Spratlys, maintaining a presence and incorporating these islands into national planning and defense strategies. These actions fulfill the requirements of continuous, peaceful, and public display of authority, as defined by jurisprudence stemming from cases such as the Island of Palmas, 1928, and Sovereignty over Pedra Branca, 2008. Vietnam's legal argument also incorporates the principle of ut possidetis juris, which holds that newly formed states should inherit their pre-independence administrative boundaries. Consequently, Vietnam argues that its historical administration of the Spratlys under French Indochina justifies present-day sovereignty over the entire archipelago, including Sandy Cay. Although Sandy Cay lies geographically closer to the Philippines' Thitu Island, Vietnam contests the legal sufficiency of proximity-based claims. Citing jurisprudence and legal precedent, Vietnam argues that geographical closeness is not a primary determinant of sovereignty, particularly in maritime territorial disputes involving islands and low-tide elevations. Instead, Vietnam emphasizes the legal title acquired through historical consolidation, state functions, and administrative measures. It further contends that the Spratlys form a natural extension of its continental shelf, aligning with its maritime entitlements under UNCLOS Articles 76 and 77. In terms of modern geopolitical presence, Vietnam has actively occupied, garrisoned, and administered more than 20 features within the Spratly chain, maintaining military outposts, airstrips, and communications infrastructure. These ongoing actions serve as a manifestation of state authority, reinforcing its claim to effective and continuous control, elements that are critical under effective occupation doctrine in territorial disputes. Vietnam's diplomatic posture has consistently reinforced this legal position. In a 2012 communication to the United Nations, the permanent representative of Vietnam asserted, "Vietnam has indisputable sovereignty over the Hoang Sa, Paracel, and Truong Sa, Spratly archipelagos. This sovereignty is based on historical evidence and legal grounds and has been consistently exercised by successive Vietnamese states in a peaceful and continuous manner." This sentiment was echoed in a 2020 press briefing by Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lê Thi Thu Hang, who reaffirmed Vietnam's commitment to peaceful dispute resolution anchored in international law, while strongly rejecting rival claims that lack historical or legal foundation. From a strategic perspective, Vietnam's claim to Sandy Cay also serves broader national security and geopolitical purposes. In the face of China's expansive nine-dash-line narrative and Philippine assertions of proximity-based sovereignty, Vietnam seeks to assert its maritime agency within the regional security architecture. The South China Sea is not only a vital trade artery, but also a theater of strategic competition, and Hanoi's claim to Sandy Cay underscores its intention to play a decisive role in shaping regional maritime order. Furthermore, Vietnam leverages multilateral forums and regional diplomacy, such as ASEAN, to bolster its position. By portraying itself as a law-abiding maritime stakeholder, Vietnam aims to contrast its legalistic and historically grounded approach with the revisionist or ambiguous claims of other regional powers. This approach aligns with its broader strategy of defending sovereignty without provoking war, a delicate balancing act in a highly volatile maritime theater. In conclusion, Vietnam's claim to Sandy Cay is not an isolated assertion, but rather part of a comprehensive legal, historical, and geopolitical framework. Through historical continuity, administrative legacy, international legal argumentation, and active presence, Vietnam positions itself as a legitimate and responsible claimant in the South China Sea. As tensions escalate and regional alignments shift, Hanoi's claim to Sandy Cay will remain a cornerstone of its national maritime doctrine, symbolizing both its historical legacy and its enduring commitment to a rules-based international order. Sandy Cay, located near Thitu Island, Pag-asa, in the Spratlys, holds significant strategic value despite its small size. Its proximity to other contested features makes it a key maritime outpost for any claimant. The sovereignty of Sandy Cay has major implications for territorial seas, EEZs, and continental shelves, as control over such features can extend a nation's maritime jurisdiction and access to resources like fisheries and hydrocarbons. The dispute over Sandy Cay reflects broader regional power dynamics and Indo-Pacific geopolitics. It highlights the strategic competition between claimants, particularly in the context of freedom of navigation and regional security concerns. Environmental protection of these features is also a significant issue, as they are vital to marine biodiversity. The situation around Sandy Cay remains tense, with frequent maritime patrols and incidents, particularly involving the Philippines, China, and Vietnam. Diplomatic efforts, like the ASEAN-China Code of Conduct, have made little progress, and militarization in the region continues to escalate. While the Philippines invokes its 2016 arbitral victory, China rejects the ruling, and Vietnam maintains its historical claims, creating a diplomatic deadlock. Sandy Cay remains a symbolic and strategic flashpoint in the broader South China Sea dispute. Thank you for tuning in to our channel. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to like, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth analysis of global issues.